actually I edited the book, so I went over it several times. So I had to, refresh my memory a little bit because it was a little while ago. And there are chapters in it like money matters, marriage matters with Ishan and Namrata, and of course on art, architecture, and the essence that is India and everything else. So I want to ask you, Beloo, tell us about the origins of Antaryatra. How and when did you conceive it? I mean, Sunaina has mentioned that it was started about, as you said, 3 years ago, but how did it come about in yourself? I mean, when did it start forming itself?
Yeah, so I think I had already started writing for Sri Aurobindo's Action a year, maybe a few months before I started writing this series. So I've been writing some articles off and on various topics, kindness, whatever, love for nature and things like that. And then one day, Manjuti said, why don't you start writing something that can go in the center spread of the journal, and let this become a series. And I thought, okay, sounds like a good idea, let's talk more about it. And then she said, how about making some Sri Aurobindo's things on Indian culture more accessible. So the initial thought was also to do some sort of like a compilation of Sri Aurobindo's passages and quotes, not only from his book Foundations of Indian Culture, but also other writings on India and culture and society and politics and everything, the integral thing. But then it didn't sound that would, that's just another compilation. So we thought we'll make it a little bit more interesting. So then we had another member of Sri Aurobindo's Action, Mary. So Mary, before you came in, Mary was the one.
To mention that.
Yes. So Mary and Manjuti and I, we met at Mango Hill for a lunch, and that's when the idea started coming that how about we write it as a novel, but not really a novel. So let's introduce some characters. And then I thought, okay, that would be nice. So I went home, I kind of reflected, meditated on the idea, and then 3 chapters I wrote. But within those 3 chapters, the essence was still not coming because I was getting so caught up in the idea of writing a novel. And I've been an academic through and through. I'm not a fiction writer, a creative writer like that. So that's why I think the challenge was to not make it too novel-like and not go into too many details where Yuvan gets lost in the details. So it sort of like became a journey within to keep my academic voice out, yet write it in a reader-friendly, accessible way to make Sri Aurobindo accessible to people who love to say that Sri Aurobindo is very difficult to understand. But I don't think he's difficult to understand, he just requires us to be persistent and patient. But people don't pick him up because the idea is that he's too difficult. So I thought what we can, so that yatra sort of began within, in my own writing voice itself. And Mary helped me a lot with editing and cutting out excess that was there in the first 3 chapters. And I think once that rhythm started, then every month I was supposed to give them something or the other. What also helped me was that I was also reflecting a little bit on, because we have to situate the outer and the inner journey together. No inner journey happens rooted from the context. So for me, the way this project was, that Yuvan, he's a 22, 23-year-old fresh graduate from college. So for him, he doesn't know what this country is all about. And he, like many other questioning, seeking youth, is looking for what next. So he says, how about I travel through India? And then again, I had read somewhere that if travel, when done in a very conscious way, can also be a very good way to come close to a sense of India. Stories are another beautiful way, because India is a land of stories. So I started bringing in all those themes, and then I thought, how about I make him start from Varanasi, the old sense of the old India, and then bring him to Pondicherry, which is the new India. So his journey starts in Varanasi, Kashi, and ends up in Pondicherry, where he ends up staying for the year. I mean, we use devices like that was the 150th year of Sri Aurobindo, the last year. So we thought, okay, we put him in Pondicherry.
Were you on a journey, physical, literal journey? Did you undertake those journeys yourself, and somewhere it struck you that?
Yeah, I mean, I've been to these places. Yes, so certainly, because I was familiar with these places, so I could picturize them. There were a few other times when Manjudi suggested, take him there, take him there. I said, no, I can't write based on internet research. I have to be there, then it becomes more authentic. So, but then I think after a while, we also just decided enough outer journeys, focus more on the inner journey. So then he stopped traveling in one year, he just days in Pondicherry. And that's when he goes deeper into studying of Sri Aurobindo.
Okay, I have a few questions in mind, but I'll go straight to the next one, which is like, do you, like you won, I think in many parts of the book, do you believe that there's a large number of Indian youth who have been turning to spirituality in the current times? Has it been a huge challenge for them, given the fact that they are constantly bombarded with things or temptations that lead to other aspirations, as you alluded to, and as we know? So this is a question in two parts. So the second part may be related, which is why is it that our social systems have not really been able to awaken a real thirst among the youth to know about their country and culture? What is hampering their understanding?
Yeah, they are both connected, both these questions. So thank you. Certainly, for the first one, are there a lot more yuvans out there? I believe there are. And I think because they, for various reasons, they might get distracted. A lot depends on the context, the family, environment in which they have grown and from which they are coming from. But also who they meet and the kind of exposures, experiences they have. Oftentimes, there's confusion between religiosity and spirituality comes in. So there is, yes, in today's India, there is a lot of awakening happening. Resurgence of Indianness and all of that is happening. But a lot of it is also somewhat on the surface level. At the religious level, it's like going to the roots means going back to your religious roots. How to distinguish between what is the outer religionness as compared to the inner seeking that Nandkishorji was also alluding to. Again, I found that Yuvan also has that experience. In fact, I've made him reflect on this when he goes to Matri Mandir, the day he spends in Auroville. And the question that he asks there is about the difference between religion and spirituality. And I've had, through him, I bring out one or two passages from Sri Aurobindo and Mother, and also from Nalinikant Gupta, about what does it mean when we say India is a land of seekers, or why India is considered a spiritual country. Does that mean that every walking Indian is, a spiritually realized person? No. He speaks so eloquently that what it means is that that our culture places highest value on that, on spiritual seeking and spiritual experience and realization as the highest aim of life. And that does not mean giving up the life or the challenges or the struggles that we are experiencing right now. Religion, on the other hand, puts everything in a box. Right? So through that kind of a thing, I've had him explore. I think why I put that there, because I've seen young people struggling. Either through social media, they are given this, all these social media influencers these days are trying to impress youth by saying things like, how do you know what are the benefits of doing Ekadashi Vrat? Not that there is anything wrong with doing Ekadashi Vrat, but to see that as a way of going back to the roots is just again going back to the old religiosity, or different ways to chant a certain mantra, or the kind of puja padvati that you must follow on this and this particular day during Navratri or things like that. Nothing wrong with religiosity if you are doing it in the true spirit. but to consider that as the only way of going within. So sometimes I think many of the youngsters get a little put off by that I don't want to go into this whole ritualistic thing. But you told me that India is a land of spirituality. Spirituality has to mean something beyond this. So Yuvan is also asking those kinds of questions. But at the same time, when he's sitting near Ganga Ghat in Varanasi or in Rishikesh, or he's standing in his cousin's balcony and looking at the women going to the temple, and he reflects that I've never gone to a temple, but yet I can see the beauty of how these women are, dressed up and going to perform a certain ritual. He can see through that because he has developed a kind of a seeing, and this inner seeing through the outer act. So that is one thing. Yes, there is a lot of curiosity, a lot of awakening, but the guide has to be there.
Yes, a certain opening, like a book falls and
yes.
miracles happen, and then you come across these things.
The right person comes along. I mean, he meets the right man.
Meets several people,
including an auto driver who introduces him to Sri Ramakrishna. So, like that.
The restaurant owner.
Yeah, the restaurant owner in Dwarka. Yes. So, many things. So, that's for your part number one, that yes, there is a seeking, there is an awakening, but it has to be channelized. The next part, I think I would maybe invite Nand Kishorji also to add his input, and maybe others who are connected with the work of education. We have Geetaji also here from Tagore College. What is the problem with our societal systems, particularly education, I think, which fails to, how do you say, awaken this really
first among the youth to know about their country, and especially culture. I mean, even I can give my example. We begin by turning to the West, and then we know what is better for us. So, it happens. So why is it, why has the education system failed us in a way? We wasted years.
Maybe that's my take on what's given. Because one is the problem of validation. The problem of looking for validation that comes from elsewhere, or we ourselves pushing for. This is the first problem. Second problem is that the colonizers were able to make us to feel inferior. This was their strength. I'll give you a simple example. This is a model that they used across the world. They would call everyone as barbarians. Perhaps the only population that called Europeans as barbarians were Japanese. They felt they were much more superior than the Europeans. They called the British and the Portuguese as barbarians. Apart from them, nobody else was able to do this one. And they pushed across this narrative very, very strongly. They came to India, saw Indians brushing teeth with neem sticks, rock salt, and also, charcoal. They said, these are uncivilized people. Look at the way they brush it. And our people did not have capacity to speak to them and say what exactly it is. Language barrier to many other things. Secondly, they have already done a particular type of narrative where by very look of you to everything they despise, there's no way to speak back. But down the lane, as I say, because it's a civilization that umpteen number of people have tried to destroy, and I've always felt it is like an eternal womb. And the truth has to come out. There's no possibility to hide, and that's why down the lane after, let's say 70 years after they have left this country, today we have arrived at a situation where an international manufacturer makes a toothpaste using a high-paid model to jump into your bathroom and ask, does your toothpaste have salt? And also, they are making neem toothpaste. They are also making charcoal toothpaste. It's as simple as that. So what I see is the validation that we look for, not ready to take a journey with our own masters. And that's a problem that perhaps of the Western education, because there is no instance whatsoever where people from the East have gone to the West for spirituality. It's always the other way around. Easterners have gone for money. Easterners have gone for better living conditions. better life, through so many other comforts, but not for spirituality. It's always been the other way around. They have come here after having all the materialistic wealth, but there is something that's still missing. That's where perhaps when you said that a rickshawala introduces to Paramahamsa, this tradition is there from long ago. When Shankara happened to see the Chandala in front of him, where the students say that Ashuddha and move out and all that thing, and the Chandala asks back to Shankara, saying that what type of Shuddhi are you talking about? Is it Antaranga Shuddhi or Bahiranga Shuddhi? Then immediately Shankara realizes that Shankara himself is in front of him because Jnana leaves him. Jnana is that. That's why I used in the beginning itself saying that it is about realization of the karmas. And that's the Jnana. And the moment it happens, Jnana leaves and Shankara realizes that it was a blunder. Immediately he prostrates in front of and realizes that is Shankara. Because Jnana doesn't get attached with these strings, because these strings are validation. So our academic, our education system is stuck at validation, and it still thinks that there is nothing that perhaps is original here. We need everything to be coming from there, and this has been done deliberately. It is not that it is not a possibility in modern India that we could have perhaps tried doing this. We could have taken cue from Germans, we could have taken cue from the Japanese. There were a number of examples that were available, but somehow, as I said, that because number of leaders in the beginning of this country or modern India, they themselves were Western educated. That's the reason they tried looking at everything from that perspective only. When Shama Shastri first time translated Artha Shastra, he writes Rajya and Rashtra as state. The Western notion of state is very simple. It requires legislature, executive and judicial. But Rajya and Rashtra is a much more powerful word. And it is loaded. But he doesn't just worry about that one because he wants an audience in Europe to read that one. So he thinks, without even trying to give a footnote, he just goes on giving these validations. So this is part of our own urbanistic tradition. That's a problem that we find. I don't know when perhaps there will be a possibility to revive. I see a spark, I see something that's happening. That is precisely the reason perhaps Sri Aurobindo broke that path and came. He wanted to revive. And he felt that the British were essential, or colonialism was essential as a jolt to awaken that part where otherwise we would have not realized the value. That's perhaps my partial submission.
Yeah, I think what again it goes back to this idea that the colonization of the mind. And in India, as you said, the Sanatan tradition has always been, we have not seen things in binaries like this is spiritual and this is secular. Now, after such a long time, where we had forgotten this truth, Mother reminds us again very forcefully, there is only one life, no ordinary life and spiritual life. She says this in a conversation. So it's like bringing back the truth we have forgotten. But our education is based on that binary, that certain things are outside of the purview of our classrooms because they are spiritual. And this was done very deliberately. And what is left in this definition of secular is only a shell of an India, where India is just a nation like any other nation. But what is Mother India? What is that's why I kind of made Iman start with that idea that Mother India is not a nation. It's not only her people, but it's a power, it's a godhead. And it goes back to, I've forgotten whether I mentioned that anywhere in the book or not, but it goes back to a conversation Sri Aurobindo had when he was a teacher in Baroda, where he had his students, and K.M. Munshi has written about it in his writings on Sri Aurobindo, where he had all his students stand around a table with the map of India in between, and he asked them, you want to serve India? Do you see Mother India? What do you see? If you see only a piece of paper and a drawing of a map, you are not ready to serve Mother India. You have to see Mother, not Mother India, you have to see your mother in it. Then you are ready to give up everything. So this divided construct that was given to us for so many years. Sure, Britishers had their own agenda, to make us all survive. But in independent India, we had no reason to continue that, and yet we continued. Because maybe it was easier, maybe because there were many other agendas, but we are paying the price for it. So that's why it cannot awaken the thirst to know India in the Indian way, where that distinction between spiritual and secular. That's why I really wanted to bring the chapter on money and marriage and things like that, which are part of so-called ordinary life.
Thank you. So I'll just turn to some other aspect of the book, and I'll read from the foreword. I wrote a few lines and then ask you a question again in two parts. I've just written that I will desist from giving away the plot by revealing the marvelous places one visits across the country, or indeed in many instances is guided to. You are invited to take the journey yourself. Here's a quote from Sri Aurobindo. He says, and I quote it in the foreword, "It is necessary that those who create, whether in great things or small, whether in the unusual masterpieces of art and genius, or in the small common things of use that surround a man's daily life, should be habituated to produce, and the nation habituated to expect, the beautiful in preference to the ugly, the noble in preference to the vulgar, the fine in preference to the crude, the harmonious in preference to the gaudy." Leafing through the book, when one reads these sentences, he fondly recalls how carefully and meticulously Radhesham, their middle-aged gardener that is in his house, always prunes those topiaries that surround the front door of the house. He then remembers his mother telling him the credit for the admiration she would often get from her friends for her bonsai plants was all Radhesham's, because he was the one taking care of all the delicate pruning, just like an artist. So this really touched me, because we talk about high art, but here was a gardener, pruning those trees and making it so presentable and beautiful. So I, for one, really wish I had read this book when I was Yuva's age. That would certainly have saved some time for me. I truly believe Antaryatra is not just a must-read for the young, Indian or not, but for all those who see through the falsehoods and the fallacy of the so-called progress, which has seen the reversals of fortunes for humanity as a whole, leading us to increasing suffering and despondency. But again, it's never too late, for as Beloo Mehra sums up in the introduction, in every chapter of the book, you will have an opportunity, along with you one, to reflect on some key insights given by Sri Aurobindo on the future of India, on the work India is destined to do for the humanity and the world, on the path that India must follow if she has to awaken to her true nature and purpose, her Swabhava and her Swadharma. So this is excellent, and as I said, this kind of thing touched me, although there is a lot of temples that Yuvan visited and a lot of insights about them. So my next questions to you is a little kind of, probably a little more personal. So I wanted to know, how has your own journey been as a youth? Were there any particular events or epiphanies that made you turn to the teachings of Sri Aurobindo and appreciate all that India has to offer? I say this because you could have chosen anyone else, but you chose Sri Aurobindo's teachings.
Okay, I don't think we can say that I chose, or any of us can say that we chose Sri Aurobindo. It's always the Guru who chooses you. So probably we are ready at a certain point in life, and we may or may not be seeking, but then Guru comes and just picks you up, and then that's it. But yes, there I think in terms of preparation or whatever readiness, there were a few things, in the sense that I did grow up in a family which is rooted in Hindu tradition, but in the true sense of the Hindu tradition. Whereas my mother was into doing her daily rituals of Aarti, morning and Samvad evening. but no imposition of any kind, but always kind of like an exposure to that. Yes, ask if you want to know more. If you don't want to do it, that's fine, but just ask me why I'm doing it or things like that. So no imposition, no force of any kind. But yes, there was one ritual that I gladly was a part of, which was something that was done by my father for many years, daily reading of Ramcharitmanas in the evening. So that maybe made me ready in some ways. So I love Ramcharitmanas as a text. But then, life happens, college happens, so many other things. Secular education happens, questioning, denial, rejection, all those things happen. But then fast forward to the fact that I was living in United States for a number of years, studying there, teaching there, absorbing all that the West has to offer, the best that the West has to offer, I would say, in terms of higher education. I think India has still, the modern higher education in India can learn several things. But there is always that longing to know your mother culture a little bit more deeply. So I had already been reading things like, I know a particular specific moment so clearly, I can see, this is the problem with our education system. For all these years, we were still taught Aryan-Dravidian divide. And I was, much before internet became, all the social media and all that happened, I was part of a Yahoo group. There was no Google at that time. And this discussion was happening about the Aryan-Dravidian divide in India. And I was one of those people who had bought into that also, because that's what our education had taught. And then somebody pointed out, under which rock have you been living? A lot of stuff, a lot of research has come out which totally refutes it. And that was like a wake-up thing for me that no, I really need to know my civilizational history a little bit more. So I had been reading things on India, but then when I first read, there are a series of events that brought me to Pondicherry. In fact, I had been to Pondicherry even before going to the US, but that was more of just a tourist thing. But when I finally came to Pondicherry in 2004, and I started reading much more carefully and deeply, the first book I read was Sri Aurobindo's Foundations of Indian Culture. There was no doing that. Like, that's the thing. That's just like all the combos that were there in my head about India and to know India in a deeper way. That book did it for me. In 2-3 days, I finished cover to cover, and then I picked Human Cycle, and then I went back to Foundations of Indian Culture and few other things. But before that, I had read snippets here and there. Mother's compilation, Sunlit Path, and things like that, which kind of like went a little bit above me, because it had to start with, from what Sri Aurobindo says, from near to far. For me personally, it was my Indianness, and then everything else of integral yoga. That has been my journey. So naturally that comes very clearly in Yuan's case also. So that was, I don't know if that addresses your question.
Yes, to a great extent. Would you like to read perhaps something that, for us, maybe some favorite page or...
Something that which I have not marked actually, but I can just mention the experience he speaks of at Ajanta, when he's standing in front, in cave number 1, in front of Padmapani Bodhisattva. It was a very personal experience for me. And I just gave that to Yuman, but so to me, that was like literally, I had only read up till then the marvel that Ajanta painting is in Sri Aurobindo's writings. But standing there, it was like as if Sri Aurobindo was standing there. It became just so real. His words became so real. So I don't know if I can find that, but maybe I can read something else. I didn't know you were going to ask me to.
It's okay if you don't want to.
So let me just pull out something. Something to do with India?
Anything.
No, anything. Oh, then anything I can read. that I had marked. I think there was one on page 50. I thought, yeah. So this is the moment where Yuval, while reflecting on his own bad educational experience, the mainstream educational experience, and now that he's been reading Sri Aurobindo, he's kind of thinking about how Sri Aurobindo is becoming his guide. He's still using the word guide, but it's like Sri Aurobindo is taking him on as a follower, he's becoming his guru. So this is on page 50. So he's talking about the art and things like that, and he's thinking, what do I do any art? Am I an artist of any sort after listening about? By the way, that gardener thing is again inspired by Mother's conversation where she speaks of gardening as an art, and from her time in Japan. So everything is there. Only I just am an instrument in bringing that out in a different way. So then he thinks about, he's a writer. So he thinks about, have I written something that can be called art or creative or something like that? And then he's reflecting on that experience. So he wondered, and now that he had written something, which is like a reflection in a diary, that I haven't written anything artistic, so how can I call myself a writer or an artist? And then he's asking, has Sri Aurobindo written anything on writing? So this is how he begins. So it's like layered reflections. He wondered if Sri Aurobindo had written anything about writing. He must have. After all, he was such an amazing writer, he thought the next instant. And what about joy? What does Sri Aurobindo have to say about that? How to experience joy? Joy of writing. Joy while doing any kind of work. Is there something like that? So many questions were coming up in his mind, and somehow he felt that he could seek answers to those in Sri Aurobindo. And the very next instant he observed this thought arising in himself. Isn't that interesting? It is as if I'm beginning to think of Sri Aurobindo as my guide. Is it for real? He wondered. Yuan made a mental note that he would get some more books of Sri Aurobindo and start reading him more systematically. Yes, that would be really nice. Something inside told him. He felt he had some sort of a plan formulating slowly. Plan for some serious study. A study that would actually give him an inner joy, a deeper purpose, a greater richness and beauty. He was also able to slowly realize that he should also start writing whatever little he was beginning to understand of Sri Aurobindo, even if it was just for himself to begin with. This would be a good way to deepen his own study. Yes, he would definitely do that. Isn't it funny, Yuan thought, all through my college years, I have never really been interested in studying so seriously. And now, with this one little book, I feel such a joy in planning out my future plan of study. And for what? No degree or certificate, but only for myself. Isn't that great? He smiled quietly and took a loving glance at the book in his hand, India's Rebirth by Sri Aurobindo. Rebirth. He smiled again, thinking of this word. And he made another mental note that he should read more about Sri Aurobindo himself. And that's like in the next chapter he finds a biography by Rishabh of Sri Aurobindo. And then when he looks at Sri Aurobindo as a child and he reads about Sri Aurobindo and Mrinalini Devi, he gets a very different understanding of him. That's when the love awakens. So from guide to the guru, the transition begins to happen.
Yeah. At one point in the conversation, you mentioned that book Savitri and the Night Divine may be a little inaccessible in the sense of the language and understanding. So, what are your views on that vis-a-vis the youth and people who come first?
Yes, so that goes back to the intention, the purpose of writing the book in this way. So, because of all the problems that we were just talking about in our education and the failure of our education to create a thirst in a genuine sort of way, which is not bound by dogma of any kind, and which is anyway kind of a free quest. I personally, maybe this is a biased opinion, I personally feel there can be no better teacher than Sri Aurobindo. But how to approach Sri Aurobindo? Because he's there, like, sitting in that big chair with Savitri on one side and Life Divine on one side, and people think that you have to read Sri Aurobindo, you must start with Savitri or Life Divine. Because either he's there in the university academia, or he's there within ashram and ashram connected institutions where those who have already turned to him are gathering and talking about his integral yoga, his philosophy. But the real, the youth of India are not exposed in that sense. So that was the intention, that how do you make Sri Aurobindo accessible to those who are genuinely seeking something beyond their ordinary, success and all those things. So that's why I didn't touch Life Divine or Savitri. Towards the end, he starts studying with a senior ashramite, and he helps her actually do some writing based on synthesis of yoga and things like that. But that comes at the very end. Just like in the Bhagavad Gita, the 18th adhyaya comes at the very end. The first thing Krishna tells Arjuna is, wake up! Do your Kshatriya dharma. So start from where you are. That's what his journey is. So towards the end, he'll come to that. He sees that Sri Aurobindo has a lot more to offer than just India or his advice on money or his writings on art. It's like a full formula for transforming your nature. But you have to start the journey. So I think in some ways, as an educator, I would also say, take Sri Aurobindo from where you are. So I think it goes back to a discussion we had about poetry, right? When they introduce Sri Aurobindo in master's level curriculum, it's usually passages from Savitri. No. In fact, I would say, to this yes. So to this lady that at that conference, I said, why not a 4-line poem of Sri Aurobindo? A tree. That's a 4-line poem. Or God. That's another 6 lines. But so much philosophical, profound truth is there in those 4 lines and 6 lines. So introduce Sri Aurobindo in that way, I think.
I think we also can ask Dr. Nandkishore, because probably Sri Aurobindo's writing is a little difficult. So, once you begin to understand, it becomes more of a kind of a solid understanding, it appears formidable, but the difficulty makes the journey difficult, but once you get there, then, it becomes really ingrained. What do you think of Sri? If you make your students read Sri Aurobindo and understand, what approach would you have to?
Perhaps I take you from what Dr. Beloo said, that when she said that I might be biased, that perhaps he is the greatest teacher. Maybe for her. Now for me, while introducing to teachers, I cannot perhaps push that. Then what happens is they will feel that I am biased. But she is entitled to be biased. Because she loves their religion. But that might not be the case with anybody else. So rather, I use a different approach. I tell them that we belong to a tradition where we are open to noble thoughts coming from anywhere. That's how I start with. Right? I simply tell them that in the Vedic tradition, there is nothing called fixated idea of anything, and there is also nothing called ultimate about anything. So wherever from it is, whether it is from the west, whether it is from the east, from our own land, from wherever it is, let the noble thoughts come. This is what I tell them. So for that, then I tell them that why don't we start with one noble thought, perhaps from an accepted teacher, from an accepted guru, or accepted, because I had certain people even taking offense to, me calling Sri Aurobindo as a guru. They quoted some passage saying that we may not. But generally, they themselves will not claim. That's not the tradition of this land where they themselves will claim that I am a guru and you follow me. It is the seeker who sees a guru, and it's very personal. What appears to me as a guru might not appear to another. Somebody may look like a mad person to somebody else. That's how many of them felt about Sri Ramakrishna. So it depends on how they are drawn into. So I simply say that let's look at with an open mind and see if there is something that we can seek from this particular scholar who has been read by so many people. That means there should be some value. So I rather introduce them this way rather than giving them a background that he is already great or he is the teacher.